Hi, my name is Dan Nicholson, and I want to help you improvise. In order to improvise on a 2-5-1, a player must really know each chord. They must know what the chords in the sequence have in common, as well as what is different. The good news is that all three chords in the sequence share the same scale, or the same key signature. The one chord is the last chord in the sequence, and we get our scale, or key signature, from it. In this video, we will learn about each of the chords in the sequence and how to connect them with single-note lines. We'll start with the one chord. An improviser must be able to see each scale in their mind. Reading any of these exercises or exercises related to improvisation doesn't do the player much good. Using our eyes is a crutch and often gets in the way of what we're really trying to do. Our goal here is to connect both sides of our brain directly to our instrument and spontaneously create music. Our right brain gives us creative ideas like rhythms and melodies, while our left brain helps us find the right notes to express these ideas. It is very important that the player get away from the written page as soon as possible. Instead of using our eyes to see scales and chords written on a page, let's try to make a mental picture that we can use as a map instead. If we can create a really clear map in our heads of a scale, we're more likely to be able to use it to skip around and play shapes and patterns without getting lost. So now let's picture a staircase. Now see each stair as being a different note in the G major scale. With this image in your head, if it's truly clear, you should be able to skip notes and play shapes and patterns, just like you'd be able to walk up and down these stairs. Remember that the 2 chord, the 5 chord, and the 1 chord all share the same scale or key signature. This is your G major staircase, and we'll use this same staircase for all 3 chords in the sequence. Depending on your instrument, your staircase might not go this high, or it may go higher. Your staircase probably has some stairs below the bottom stair shown in this picture too. You can imagine a staircase that fits your instrument and build your own mental map as we go. Here's the 1 chord, G major 9. The notes in red are the chord tones. The chord tones are the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th notes of the scale. Notice that they are all separated by 1 step. Now let's play our G major scale up to the 9th and back down in 8th notes. Notice as you go up and down that the chord tones are falling on each beat. This is how we express a chord in a linear fashion. If we shifted the rhythm ahead or behind by 1/8 note, we'd be expressing an entirely different chord. We'll keep coming back to this idea of putting chord tones on beats throughout the video. Now let's play up and down the chord in 8th notes. By only playing chord tones without the scale notes between them, you could really play any rhythm that you want. They're all chord tones, so you don't have to worry about playing a non-chord tone on a beat. That being said, we'll use 8th notes in this example. Now let's combine our chord and our scale into one phrase. We'll play up the chord and then down the scale, all in 8th notes. Now might be a good time to pause the video and practice what we have learned. If you have perfect pitch, you may have noticed that the G we've been talking about is actually a concert B flat. So if you play a concert instrument like piano, trombone, guitar, or flute, then you may want to make your own staircase with the B-flat major scale. If you play a B-flat instrument, like tenor saxophone or trumpet, then you should make a C major staircase. If you play alto or bari sax, we're already in the right key. Lucky you. Once you have drawn your staircase or made one in your mind, practice each of these things. Practice going up and down the scale from the root to the ninth. Practice going up and down the chord from the root to the ninth. And then practice going up the chord from the root to the ninth, and then back down the scale to the root. Now let's learn about our 2 chord, A minor 9. You may have learned that a minor chord has a lowered third and a lowered seventh, but I want to keep things simple for you. And this comparing A minor to A major really muddies the water. We're just going to play the exact same shapes, starting on the second stair instead of the first stair. That's a lot simpler, isn't it? We're still on the same staircase, the same scale, the same key signature. We're just starting on the second stair. Here's the G major 9 chord, and here's the A minor 9 chord, just one stair up. Okay, let's play our A minor scale. We'll start on the root, A, and go up to the 9th note, the 9th stair, and then come back down the stairs, one at a time. We'll play 8th notes. Now let's play the A minor chord. We'll take the stairs 2 at a time, skipping the scale notes between. We'll start at the bottom on A and go up to the 9th note, B again, and back down in 8th notes. And now let's combine those two. We'll go up the A minor chord and then down the scale. Again, all in 8th notes. Now may be a good time to pause the video again and practice the 2 chord. If you are playing a concert instrument, this is C minor in the key of B flat major and starts on the C stair. If you are playing a B flat instrument, this is D minor in the key of C and starts on the D stair. Practice playing up and down the scale from the root to the 9th, up and down the chord from the root to the 9th, and up the chord, then down the scale from the root to the 9th. Don't forget to practice with the metronome. Combining the 2 chord and the 1 chord. At this point, we're going to practice the 2 chord and the 1 chord next to each other. We'll add the 5 chord between these chords a little later, but we want to clearly see where we are starting and where we are headed first. Notice how all of the chord tones for the 2 chord, A minor, are just one note or one stair above the chord tones for the 1 chord, G major. Seeing this will help simplify your ideas. We'll introduce the 5 chord later and learn to see it as more of a connecting chord than a starting or ending place. This is key to avoiding getting lost or confused when playing 3 different chords in a row. Let's play up the chord and down the scale for both the 2 chord and the 1 chord, one right after the other. We'll start on A and take the steps 2 at a time up to the 9th, then walk back down the scale 1 note at a time. Then do the same thing on the 1 chord. Start on G and take the stairs 2 at a time up to the 9th, and then walk back down 1 stair at a time. Now that you have learned the 2 chord and the 1 chord, I want you to take some time to improvise with them. You can make a lot of music with just 2 chords, and it's a good idea to play with the chords and scales that you have learned so that you can learn them better and get used to improvising with a set of notes. It is also important to learn to feel the length of a phrase. I recommend that you start with 2 measures of each chord, thus playing a 4-bar phrase. Most of Western music is made up of 4-bar phrases. At first, just use the chord tones so that there's no danger of accidentally implying the 1 chord when you're on the 2 chord, or vice versa. Once you can do that, try to use the notes between the chord tones as well. Remember that chord tones need to be on the beat when playing scalar ideas in order for it to come across to the listener. Here are some examples of me playing over these 2 chords in a 4-bar phrase. And now I'll improvise a little bit more and use the non-chord tones between the chord tones as well. Notice that I'm keeping the chord tones on the beat so the chord still comes across and you can hear the change from one chord to another. I'll keep it simple and then dress it up a little bit as I go. Now would be a good time to pause the video again and practice improvising with these 2 chords. First, use only the chord tones, making sure to phrase each chord for 2 measures, thus playing 4-bar phrases. Once you can do that, try adding some scalar passages and remember to keep the chord tones on the beat. At this point, we can go in 2 different directions. We can learn our 2 and 1 chords in all 12 keys, or we can stay in this key and add the 5 chord. I often work with students simultaneously on both. The long game is to be able to express this sequence of chords in any key at a moment's notice, but this is a long journey and will take some time. So that we don't get too bored or frustrated, we should move on in a few familiar keys and practice applying our new language to a song. I suggest applying your new 2-5-1 material to a blues, because we can focus on just 2 keys and get some cool sounding stuff going fast. It's a lot of fun when we can slip into a 2-5-1 and really nail each chord during a solo. If you'd like to learn how to practice this in all keys, skip this next chapter and go to the next one. If you want to start getting some more advanced language together in this key, then let's talk about the 5 chord. Let's play all of the same patterns that we did for the 2 chord and the 1 chord, but ultimately we'll need to see this chord in a different way because it is not a destination or a starting place, but more of a connector. The 5 chord connects the 2 chord to the 1 chord. Let's get to know this chord. We will use the G major scale for this 5 chord, just as we did for A minor and G major. Remember that all chords in a 2-5-1 sequence use the same scale or staircase, and to form a chord, we just skip notes or take the stairs 2 at a time. Here's our D7 chord, the 5 chord in the key of G major. Note that it is built from the 5th note of the scale, or the 5th stair. It may go pretty high up on your instrument, but don't worry about it if you can't play it right now. We're more concerned with understanding where the 5 chord comes from and being able to visualize it on our internal map. We'll learn how to see this chord in a different way a little later so that you can play it without going too high on your instrument. First, let's go up and down the scale. We'll start on the D stair and go up one stair at a time to the 9th stair, and then come down one stair at a time. Once again, notice how the chord tones are on the beat when we play this in eighth notes. Now let's play up and down the chord. We'll start on the D stair and go up, taking the stairs 2 at a time, and come back down the same way. Again, since we're only playing chord tones here, any rhythm would work, but we'll play eighth notes for now. Now let's go up the chord and down the scale. We'll start on the D stair and go up, taking 2 stairs at a time, all the way up to the 9th stair, and then come down 1 stair at a time. Once again, notice how the chord tones are on the beat when we come back down in eighth notes. Once again, I suggest that you pause the video and practice this on your instrument. It's especially important to really understand and be able to visualize this 5 chord because we are going to play with it a little bit to make it fit inside our 2-5-1 a little better. Now let's learn to see the 5 chord as a connector. We've learned how the 2 chord and the 1 chord are just one step away from each other, and that each chord tone just drops down 1 step when we go from the 2 chord to the 1 chord. If we look at the 5 chord in this same way, it's confusing. The 5 chord is really far away from both the 2 chord and the 1 chord, making it awkward to play the same shapes or difficult to connect. Therefore, we need to see this chord as being built from the 3rd instead of the root. Look at our 5 chord, D7. The red notes are the chord tones. Now look at it without the root. We can see it up here in this octave, or we can see it down here in this octave. We have a third option. We could take the top 3 notes of this chord in this octave, A, C, E, and drop them an octave. This technique is called octave displacement. Any of these ways is fine and expresses the chord equally as well. By seeing the 5 chord built from the 3rd and not the root, and either down an octave or using octave displacement, we can see it in the same range as our 2 and 1 chords. Let's look at the octave displacement again because a lot of people get lost at this point or find it confusing. Notice how the top 3 chord tones in red are A, C, and E, and F sharp is on the bottom, right? Now those notes A, C, and E are on the bottom, and F sharp is on the top, right where it was. Once again, we call this technique octave displacement. If you are a chordal player, you might have learned this as an inversion. It is an inversion, but when we're playing single note lines, it's important to really understand the shape and how it works. You can use this technique when you choose to change the shape of the line, or when you need to, like when the chord extends above the range of your horn. You can do this with any chord also, and we'll do this with a 1 chord a little later in the video. Now look at what changes when we move from the 2 to the 5 chord. Here's the 2 chord, and here's the 5 chord with octave displacement. Notice how the A, C, and E do not move? These are common tones. The only thing that moves is the 7th of the 2 chord, that's the G on the A minor chord, it moves down to the third of the 5 chord, which is F sharp, during the D7 chord. You may wonder about the 9th of the 2 chord, or the B on the top of the A minor chord. That note actually fits over D7 and is really beautiful, but we won't get into that just now. At this point, we need to focus on getting to the third of the 5 chord right when the chord changes. This is how we express the change when playing one note at a time. Now let's create an 8th note line that expresses A minor very clearly and resolves to D7 right on beat 1 of the second measure. We'll go up the A minor chord to the 9th, and then we'll look down for our target note, which is the third of the next chord. The next chord is D7, so the note we're looking for is F sharp. That's the third. Then we'll just walk down the stairs to get there. We'll have to adjust our rhythm a little bit in order to hit the F sharp right on beat 1. Let's just insert an 8th note rest to make this happen. When you get to the F sharp, the third of D7, you can see the chord as extending up, or you can use octave displacement and see the chord tones down an octave below you. From here, you'll want to express the D7 chord clearly and aim for the third of the next chord, which is B, the third of G major, our 1 chord. Let's learn to see our 1 chord, G major, as being built from the third as well. Here's G major, chord tones in red, and here's the same chord without the root. Now when we left our 2-5-1, we had just clearly expressed the A minor chord and reached the third of the D7 chord, and we were looking forwards to our next target, the third of G major, which is B. So let's just walk down in quarter notes until we get to B. 4 notes, 4 stairs, 4 beats. Perfect. Now, in order to keep it from sounding too square, let's anticipate the resolution to G major. We'll actually resolve on the and of 4 just before the chord changes. This anticipation is common in jazz and something that you'll notice if you listen to much jazz music. Once we've resolved to the 1 chord, we can play the chord, or play the chord with octave displacement, or just finish our phrase. Our primary goal at this point is to be able to express each chord in the sequence clearly and hit the third of each new chord on beat 1 when it comes. With what we've learned, let's take a minute to review and understand all the choices we have along the way. In the beginning, I suggest that you improvise lines not note by note, but measure by measure. Once you start a measure, use language that you have already practiced to express that chord and concentrate on where you're headed. The following examples all start with the same lick to express the 2 chord, A minor, and it will lead us all the way to the third of the 5 chord, F sharp. Once we're there, we have choices. We can go down the scale, aiming for the third of G major. We can go up the chord and then down the scale to the third of G major. Or we can go up the chord using octave displacement to once again resolve to the third of G major. Once we get to G major, we can go up the chord and finish, or we can go up the chord with octave displacement and finish, or we can just finish. Now I'm going to play every combination that I just went through. Each one uses the same 2 chord lick and changes either on the third of the 5 chord or when we get to the third of the 1 chord. Notice how some choices lead me to a different octave when I reach the 1 chord. Also notice how many different combinations there are with just these few choices that we've learned. This time we will go down the scale from the 3rd of the 5 chord, and then a quick finish when we get to the 1 chord. This time we will go down the scale from the 3rd of the 5 chord, just like we just did, and then up the chord from the 3rd of the 1 chord. This time we will go down the scale from the 3rd of the 5 chord once again, and then up the chord from the 3rd of the 1 chord with octave displacement. This time we will go up the chord from the 3rd of the 5 chord, and then a quick finish. And here we will go up the chord from the 3rd of the 5 chord again, and then up the chord from the 3rd of the 1 chord. That's going to be pretty high. In this one we will go up the chord from the 3rd of the 5 chord again, and then up the chord from the 3rd of the 1 chord again, but this time with octave displacement. That'll be better. And this time we will go up the chord from the 3rd of the 5 chord with octave displacement, and then a quick finish. And this one again up the chord from the 3rd of the 5 chord with octave displacement, and then up the chord from the 3rd of the 1 chord. And now our final combination, up the chord from the 3rd of the 5 chord with octave displacement again, and then up the chord from the 3rd of the 1 chord, also with octave displacement. And now once again you should pause the video and practice putting your own licks together. I suggest using the same 2-chord lick every time, and then making a choice when you get to the 3rd of each following chord. Go up the A minor chord, and then down the scale until you hit the 3rd of the D7 chord. Once you're there, you know that you can go down the scale to the next 3rd, or up the chord to the next 3rd, or up the chord using octave displacement. Then once you reach the 3rd of the G chord, you have all the same choices, only there is no next chord because G is our 1 chord and was our destination all along. Therefore, you can go up the chord when you get there, you can go up the chord with octave displacement, or you can just end and think about the next destination. Each of these options can be expressed, redesigned, or decorated in countless ways and can be applied to the 2 chord as well. It is important for us to study and practice expressing these chords clearly and connecting them by resolving to the 3rd of each chord, because this is at the heart of all good bebop. It is also important for us to transcribe language from the jazz masters, analyze it, understand it, and use it. You will find that every great player has their own way to express these chords, and you can take what you like and add it to your vocabulary. practicing down in whole steps. At some point, every good player must even their keys out. By that, I mean we must be able to play any idea, any melody, any chord, and any lick in all 12 keys in order to be absolutely free when we improvise. In order to do so, we need to really know our scales and be able to visualize them as we have been doing throughout this video. If you see or think of a key and do not immediately know what its key signature is, or are unable to see it in your mind's eye, chances are you won't be able to play the lick you are trying to play in that key. Once you really know your scales, try playing a simple shape in each key and then repeating it down in whole steps. We'll learn how to do this in this section. Here's our G major staircase again. Once we have played our 2-1 lick or our 2-5-1 lick, we are finished with the progression in that key and have to start thinking about what the next key is. This is great training for playing a solo because you always have to look ahead for the next thing or the next key center or chord progression. You can do this in two ways or a combination of both ways. We could think F is a whole step below G, so now we're in the key of F and we just have to play the same shapes. If you can't figure out what is a whole step below G, or don't know immediately that the key signature for F has a B flat and everything else is natural, then this won't work. Another way to find the next key is to turn the one chord minor. The one chord is G major at this point, so let's turn it minor. We will lower the 3rd and 7th of the chord. Take a look at this again so that you can see what is changing on your mental map when we turn G major into G minor. Here's G major. Now we're going to lower the 3rd and 7th. And here's G minor. Once you make these two changes, you have your key signature and can continue. The 3rd was B, and now it's B flat. And the 7th was F sharp, and now it's F natural. All the other notes remain the same. We're only changing these two notes. Once we have turned the one chord minor, it is now the 2 of the next key, so we'll just repeat our lick or phrase in the new key. Then when we reach the one chord again in that new key, we will turn it minor, and now we're ready for the 3rd key, and so on. If we're going down in whole steps, we'll get back to the original key after we play the progression 6 times, or we have played the lick 6 times in 6 different keys.